So this woman here, this is what 10Xing is all about. This woman here is my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. She's my mother's mother. Got goosebumps right now just talking to her. Like, it's such an honor and privilege to be able to introduce you guys to my grandmother. When I was a child, my grandmother saw pain on my face. My grandmother was very angry with my father, and she saw pain on my face. I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, and my grandmother lived in Chicago, Illinois, and I would fly to Chicago, Illinois, or my mother would drive me to Chicago, Illinois every summer to spend time around my grandmother. And no matter what, my grandmother would always talk to me positively. Didn't matter what I did. If I broke a rule, my grandmother would say, "I'm so glad you're clever enough to test my rules." It's true. But all of her other grandchildren, she would beat them to a pulp. But with me, she would say, "I'm so glad you're so strong and you keep trying." She still hold me accountable. "Now go to bed." But she just had a way of talking to me that built me up. And she used to ask me to do tasks that I thought were not fair. Like, I'd be hanging out with all of her grandchildren, my cousins, and we'd be playing at her house, and she'd say, "Man," my grandmother used to call me man, she'd say, "Man, come here." And I'd say, "Sure." And I'd go and I'd say, "Yes, ma'am." And she would say, "I want you to go down the street to the store and buy some cereal for everybody to eat." And I was looking around at all my cousins thinking, "Why did you pick me?" And I would say, "Grandma, why'd you pick me?" And she said, "I'll tell you later." And I would take the money and I would go to the store. I would buy the thing my grandmother asked me to buy, and I would bring it back to her. What I didn't realize is my grandmother was programming my mind to think positively about me. I didn't realize my grandmother was 10Xing my life the entire time. Later on, I decide that it's a bad idea to take my life, thank God. I go on, I get a college degree, I get a master's degree, I become a psychotherapist, I write several books, I become really well known. And then I was in Poland. I was speaking at a conference in Poland, and I got the worst phone call of my life. Somebody called me and told me my grandmother, who I already had known had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And they called and said, "Your grandmother's fallen, and she's not gonna make it." I was in Poland speaking at a conference. "Your grandmother has fallen, and she's not gonna make it." So I hurry home. My grandmother just in a real tough way, and I go visit my grandmother in the hospital. Now, when she had Alzheimer's, she would be lucid at times and sometimes less so. And this was thankfully one of the moments she was lucid towards the very end of her life. And I walked in the hospital room, and my grandmother said, "Remember how you used to ask me why I keep picking on you? And I was gonna tell you later." And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "Now it's later." So now I'm 38 years old, 40 years old, whatever age I was. My grandmother said, "I now need to tell you why I picked on you differently than I did everyone else, all my other grandchildren." She said, "When your mother was dating your father, I didn't like him. He was mean, he was harsh. So when your mother was dating your father, I didn't like him for those reasons, and I wanted her to break up with him, and I did everything I could to try to break them up. And then your mother and father moved to Boston, Massachusetts with you and your two brothers, and I knew I couldn't protect you. I knew I couldn't protect you anymore. So the only thing I could think to do is build you up so that you could deal with the life that you were gonna have to endure. That's why I talk to you the way that I talk to you." And I learned a lesson in that moment. First lesson I learned is love is a real powerful force. No matter what obstacle you're facing in your life, love is the answer. And the second thing I learned is my grandmother, with a 6th grade education, understood transformation more than anyone else I ever met. I've since gone on to become a mental health professional, and no one I have ever met to this very day understands transformation more than my grandmother, because what my grandmother understood is what all of the speakers on this stage are trying to get you to understand, which is, this is not really about the version of yourself today. It's about the version of yourself when your life and business has been 10x'd. Does that make sense? In order to 10x your life or business, you have to become something different from what you are today. And I don't want you to fear that thing. I want you to embrace it because it's beautiful. Because it's beautiful. It's beautiful to have the opportunity to transform into the version of you that can do things you currently can't see.